It's that clockmaker's turn again.
Oh, Clarence hasn't got his wings yet, has he?
Clarence has apparently tried and failed to get his wings for 200 years. Even after working his way through life, a faithful person good enough to get into heaven, he still has to perform one more task to get his wings. Nothing is ever good enough. It's graduate school for church.
You can be a decent human being and still not have the skills or responsibility required for a task.
He's got the IQ of a rabbit.
Yes, but he's got the faith of a child.
I could easily give him more intelligence, but then he'd stop believing in me.
Maybe he can't do that for other angels and or godlike beings.
See the town?
Where? I don't see a thing.
Oh, I forgot. You haven't got your wings yet.
Do you normally show a non-wing person a vision and forget they don't have their wings? And I'm really beginning to wonder what the big deal is with having wings, other than being able to spy on unsuspecting people. That's the only power we're told about wings in this entire movie.
First of all, judging by the fact that he forgot to adjust the picture for Clarence, he probably doesn't usually show wingless angels visions of the past. Second, we're shown later in the movie that if Clarence did have wings, he could teleport and alter the fabric of reality. So wings do give you abilities other than spying on unsuspecting people.
Is this the year you can't hear on? George Bailey, I'll love you till the day I die.
I have bad hearing, and one ear worse than the other, but if you lean in that close and confess your undying love, I'm gonna notice. His good ear is about as close to her as his bad.
Jeremy, George doesn't just have bad hearing. He is completely deaf in his bad ear.
George saved his brother's life that day. But he caught a bad cold, which infected his left ear. Cost him his hearing in that ear.
So George would not have heard what Mary whispered.
Oh, I had another tussle with Potter today. I thought when we put him on the board of directors, he'd ease up on us a little bit.
You thought putting Potter on the board of directors would make him ease up on you?
Peter probably thought that Potter would be more merciful to the building and loan if he had a say in how it operates.
Also, how is it that the unfeeling Potter, the Ebenezer Scrooge of this tale, has been held back from crushing the building and loan for decades? The business requires his money to stay afloat, and he can pull the plug at any time. But because Peter Bailey is so incredibly persuasive, he's been able to hold Potter back when he's clearly ruthless and has no soul.
Potter may be cruel, but he knows it's not practical to break the law. Since Peter Bailey has still been able to pay for everything needed to keep the building and loan running, Potter doesn't have the legal right to shut them down.
Oh, if you want a shock, I think you're a great guy.
There's a reason this movie has stood the test of time, and that reason's name is Jimmy Stewart. He somehow takes the sentimentality and cheese and turns it into a big old plate of sincerity. I knew I'd have to give this sin off eventually. Might as well get it out of the way now.
Very good. What he said.
Putting a pool under this floor is a great idea. Saved us another building.
Yeah, but wouldn't building a retractable basketball floor be more expensive than constructing a building with a pool in it? I mean, look at this thing. The gym is huge enough to host a full-on Charleston dance-off, but that floor has to go somewhere when it retracts, not to mention all the other work they'd have to do to blast the foundation and a million other things to build this pool this far under the floor.
If they bought another building for the pool, they'd still have to do most of the things you just mentioned in addition to paying for another building. So putting the pool in a building they already have would save money.
George Bailey is dancing right over that crack. I've got the key.
Who is this foul tempter? Why does he care so much? And where did he even get the key? If he wants this pool open, why not just do it himself?
Let's go through this step by step.
Who is this foul tempter? Why does he care so much?
He's just some troublemaker who thought it'd be funny if all the dancers fell into the pool.
And where did he even get the key?
He could have stolen it from the person who keeps it, or he is the one who keeps it.
If he wants this pool open, why not just do it himself?
He's less likely to get caught if somebody else opens the pool for him. If he is the one who was trusted with the key, he could lie and say that Othello stole it from him. This would be believable considering the confrontation Othello just had with the guy dancing over the crack.
Yeah, movie's got a movie and all, but are you telling me they wouldn't feel the sudden inertia of the ground starting to move under their feet?
The floors are moving pretty slowly, and there's a lot of loud music and shouting, causing them to not notice the movement. Similar to how David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear.
He had the audience in this forced perspective, and instead of moving the statue, which is impossible, he was able to move the audience by taking the entire stage with the audience and shifting it just enough so that the statue would be behind one of the pillars. And to make it reappear, he just had to move that stage right back into the original position. But how could he move an entire stage with hundreds of people on it without them even noticing? First, he played very loud music with a lot of bass, so the floor was vibrating so they wouldn't notice the motion. And then he very slowly moved the platform. If you look at how much time elapsed between when the statue was going to vanish and when he actually showed it gone, it was 1 minute to 90 seconds to move this platform just 5 or 10 degrees. With all that loud music and excitement, the audience didn't feel a thing.
I had to knock down 3 people to get this stuff we're wearing here.
So in the locker room, there was a football uniform and a robe right next to each other? Besides, I'm not sure I'm buying this mad dash to the locker room to get dry clothes. Did everybody get out of the pool at the same time? Did someone yell, "Hey, you want dry clothes? Go to the locker room, first come, first serve," and everybody went ballistic?
First of all, it's common for people to leave a party around the same time. Second, since the locker room is often where you find spare clothes, and it's unlikely anyone brought an extra suit, there was probably a lot of fighting for clothing in the locker room.
No, you see, you make a wish and then try and break some glass.
But I thought you could make a wish on that mystery flame box you've wished for $1 million on twice. Why smash a window of a house that the woman you like says she loves?
First of all, I don't know why you mentioned the cigarette lighter, considering that's at Mr. Gower's drugstore and George isn't gonna walk Mary all the way down there. Second, George only views this date as a one-off. While he is kind of interested in Mary, he's still planning on leaving for college soon and doesn't want to stay in Bedford Falls.
What'd you wish, George?
Well, not just one wish, a whole hatful. Mary, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow and the next day and next year and a year after that. I'm shaking the dust of this crummy little town off my feet and I'm going to see the world. Italy, Greece, the Parthenon, the Colosseum. Then I'm coming back here and go to college and see what they know. And then I'm going to build things. I'm going to build airfields. I'm going to build skyscrapers 100 stories high. I'm going to build bridges 1 mile long.
So he's not interested in starting a relationship right now.
This is my last chance. Uncle Billy here. He's your man.
But George, they'll vote with Potter otherwise.
So you're saying that the board would go with the original motion to close the building and loan, something that George was totally okay with before this dude came out and said the board wanted to keep the business open? Or is he saying that Potter would assume control of the building and loan, which also wouldn't make sense considering he hates it?
He's saying that if George leaves, the board of directors will allow Potter to close the building and loan since there isn't anyone else qualified enough to run it besides George Bailey. Also, George was not totally okay with the building and loan closing.
I'm not interested in your book. I'm talking about the building and loan.
I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know. Well, I've said too much. You're the board here. You do what you want with this thing. There's just one thing more, though. This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter.
In fact, keeping the building and loan open is the one thing that drives almost every action George does throughout the rest of the movie.
If you close your doors before 6 p.m., you will never reopen.
Why is that again? I mean, you literally just said the bank was going to close for a week and then reopen. Shouldn't the old building and loan be able to do the same thing? I get that we're setting up the stakes here, but these are some shaky stakes at best.
It's closing time and a legal issue. Keep in mind, Potter is on the board of directors and knows why Uncle Billy closed the doors.
Well, how does a thing like this ever start? All I know is the bank called our loan.
When?
About an hour ago, I handed over all our cash.
All of it?
Every cent of it, and still was less than we owed them.
Holy mackerel.
And then I got scared, George, and closed the doors.
The whole town's gone crazy.
Yeah, hello? George, it's Potter.
Hello?
George, there is a rumor around town that you've closed your doors. Is that true? Oh, well, I'm very glad to hear that. George, are you all right? Do you need any police?
Police? What for?
Well, mobs get pretty ugly sometimes, you know. George, I am going all out to help in this crisis. I have just guaranteed the bank sufficient funds to meet their needs. They will close up for a week and then reopen.
Just took over the bank.
If the building and loan closes before its usual closing time due to lack of funds, Potter can legally declare it a failed business and force it to declare bankruptcy. Thank you, TV tropes.
Here, Ed, you remember last year when things weren't going so well and you couldn't make your payments?
Yeah, I remember. I also remember I told you that if you ever get a chance, don't tell the entire town about it.
Why would that need to be a secret? Everybody who's anybody has had financial troubles.
All right, Tom, how much do you need?
$242.
No, Tom, just enough to tide you over until the bank reads.
I'll take $242.
This dickhead was willing to take $121 from Potter as he offered to swindle the whole town to screw the building and loan, but he's going to take his full amount out of George's honeymoon money because I guess George his mom or something? I can't figure out why this guy is such a stickler for the full amount.
Tom was only willing to take half because he thought there was no other option.
Did you get your money?
No.
Well, I did. Old man Potter will pay 50 cents on the dollar for every share you've got.
50 cents on the dollar?
Yes, cash.
Well, what do you say?
No, Tom, you have to stick to your original agreement. Now, give us 60 days on this.
Okay, Randall.
Are you going to Potter's?
Better to get half than nothing.
Now that George is offering his honeymoon money to compensate, Tom knows that the building and loan is desperate and he can get the full amount without having to lose anything.
Come home. 320 Sycamore. Well, what? The Waldorf Hotel.
The only time you ever repeat what someone is saying to you on the other end of a phone to this degree is if you want someone else to hear what the other person is saying. You know, like a movie audience.
If it's a specific number, repeating it helps you remember, and it lets the other person know you're paying attention.
Well, aren't you going to make a deposit?
Oh, sure I am.
Well, then it's usually customary to bring the money with you.
This is kind of on George, though, right? I mean, nepotism is one thing, but putting your clearly forgetful uncle in charge of running the deposits is another thing completely.
One of the most essential parts of George's character is that he can't look away when someone needs help, even if it could harm him or his goals. Since George cares about Uncle Billy, and he's had this job ever since the building and loan started, George probably didn't have the willpower to take away Uncle Billy's job. Even if we ignore that, as far as we know, Uncle Billy has been doing this job excellently for decades without making a mistake even close to this level. So George probably figured that Uncle Billy was still good enough for the job.
Oh, she's got a cold. She's in bed. Caught it coming home from school. They gave her a flower for a prize, and she didn't want to crush it, so she didn't button up her coat.
All this time, science has been searching for a cure for the common cold, and we just needed to button our coats. Lazy scientists, the answer's been here the whole time.
Minor nitpick, but this isn't a cure for the common cold. It's a prevention for the common cold. Similar to how a bulletproof vest prevents gunshot wounds, but doesn't cure them.
I'm in trouble, Mr. Potter.
Look, desperate times require desperate measures, but I still find it hard to believe that George asked Mr. Potter for a bailout.
Potter is only George's final resort, since all of his friends either can't help him or are unavailable.
Why do you come to me? Why don't you go to Sam Wainwright and ask him for the money?
I can't get a hold of him. He's in Europe.
Well, what about all your other friends?
Well, they don't have that kind of money, Mr. Potter. You know that. You're the only one in town that can help me.
Why don't you go to the riffraff you love so much and ask them to let you have 8,000? You know why? Because they'd run you out of town on a rail.
Help! Help!
This works. Also, they survived this.
Why wouldn't it work? Clarence knows that George will always help someone in need when given the chance, even if George gets absolutely nothing out of it. And the first event from George's life that Clarence was shown was the time George jumped into the freezing water to save Harry. Which is almost exactly what's happening right now. As for them surviving this, humans can survive cold water for up to 15 to 45 minutes. Since Clarence is a magical creature and is in the water for about the same amount of time as George, let's just focus on George's time. George lands in the water at 1:39:20 and the scene transitions to the shack at 1:39:45. Since the scene ends before we see them get out, we have to infer how long it took the tower guard to save them. The good faith assumption is that George and Clarence were able to get to land within 15 to 45 minutes, meaning that they would have survived this.
You, if I were drowning, you'd try to save me.
This is the guy who hasn't been able to get his wings for 200 years because he's so very stupid. Maybe he's learned a thing or two, but I find it hard to believe that this guy hasn't earned his wings yet. I actually wouldn't mind seeing the terrible misadventures of Clarence and the elusive wings someday, just so we can see how he's messed this up for so long.
Judging by the fact that Clarence casually tells almost everyone he meets that he's an angel from heaven, and just expects them to believe him without question, Joseph was right to describe him as someone with the IQ of a rabbit. Also, that Clarence spinoff that you just said you'd like to see kind of exists. And it's shit. I made a crappy video about it way back in 2020.
You've got your wish. You've never been bored.
What I'd like to know is if Clarence wasn't given the power to show George's life if he didn't exist, what would the solution have been? Could he have just come up with this on his own? Or did it require George to say he wished he was never born? It's no wonder Clarence hasn't gotten his wings. The task required of him is nearly impossible. In fact, there should be a long line of people who have failed time and again to earn their wings, right?
Clarence could have come up with this on his own, or come up with something else. Also, maybe there is a long line of angels who fail to get their wings. We just didn't see that because that's not important to this story.
You had me worried. One of the oldest trees in Pottersville.
Pottersville?
This moment here, this is where George should truly realize he's in an alternate reality. If all the other things he's witnessed to this point didn't convince him, this should certainly do it. But George will continue to think everything is the same for an insane amount of time and inspire the 4th Shrek movie, and I cannot forgive that.
Jumping into an alternate universe isn't something that happens to the average person in real life. It's a simple concept when you're watching a movie, especially now, but if it actually happened to you for realsies, you'd be just as confused as George. Especially if you just got hammered. To George, the idea that it's all a dream or a result of the alcohol is a way more rational explanation than being in another dimension. Thank you, TV tropes. Also, I'd like to take this time out to say that I think Shrek Forever After is criminally underrated. But that's just my opinion.
What's the matter with him? Never saw a neck act like that before.
It's because you didn't exist, and when you don't exist, it changes the very character of other people. Nick wasn't a nice guy before because of anything about him, it was all about you. Sheesh, I should have called this Narcissism the movie and been done with it.
Nick is meaner more because he's in Pottersville rather than because he never met George.
You see, George, you were not there to stop Gower from putting that poison into the capsule.
What do you mean?
What would have been awesome is if this movie found a way to show some things that were better if George didn't exist. Like, for instance, that the family George saves at the beginning of the movie by not giving them the poison capsules. What if that family didn't even have diphtheria?
Why would the angels want George to see parts of the world that would be better without him? The entire point of Clarence being here is to prevent George from demonetization. Showing George that parts of the world would be better off without him would not only tempt him to go back to the bridge, but leave the audience feeling kinda miserable. Like, do you want It's a Wishful Life, a special so bad that even this guy supposedly apologized for it?
So I look at people that critique as weak. Weak rhymes with critique. So, if you're going to critique like, hey, this is never going to work or whatever, then I just say, you know what, let's see you try it, and then we'll see how you do. So go ahead and critique away, because all it does is make me stronger.
Interesting, George has no wallet, but he gets to keep the clothes he was wearing when all this started.
Maybe the angels just chose to take away the things that make George a person to help reinforce that he's a nobody in this world. And they didn't want a naked George running around.
No papers, no cards, no driver's license.
Oh, but look, here's that $8,000 your Uncle Billy lost. Won't do you any good here, though, but isn't that fun? Also, wouldn't that have been one of the first things he checked after putting his clothes back on? I do the wallet keys phone check every 5 minutes, and I've never even jumped into any icy rivers.
Again, George is intoxicated right now, meaning his senses are not on high alert.
A chance to see what the world would be like without you.
But only if all the things around you would have happened at the exact same time. The problem with this self-obsessed thinking is that it doesn't take into account the butterfly effect. The millions of minute ways the world changes when any tiny factor is changed. It's all there in the Ashton Kutcher documentary on the same subject. You should watch it.
This world has been created by angels of high power. They can make it however they want, and they don't have to follow the butterfly effect.
Is this the place?
Of course it's the place.
I can't get over it. George's denial during this whole thing is otherworldly. He's seen his own building and loan completely gone, new buildings, nobody knowing who he is, and he still thinks there's a chance something is the same. I know story-wise this must happen, but at what point would you know you're in an alternate reality? Before George Bailey is your answer, and you're right.
Remember that thing I said earlier about alcohol and denial? Just pretend I said that again.
Your brother Harry Bailey broke through the ice and was drowned at the age of 9.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Why would Harry have even been at that ice slide? Would he have been friends with a non-existent older brother's friends? Would they have picked the same spot on the same day without George's input? Would he have even tried to go as fast or as far without his older brother bullying him as a scare baby? For all we know, Harry might have grown up with more opportunities and in a family with more resources and one less mouth to feed.
Every man on that transport died. Harry wasn't there to save them.
Yeah, assuming that the war itself carried out the exact same way as it did when George existed. Oh, so I'm no fun now? You think I'm ruining this movie? It's 73 years old. It's had a pretty good life.
Remember that thing I said earlier about angels and the butterfly effect? Just imagine if I said that again. Twice.
It's from London.
Oh. Mr. Gower cabled you need cash. Stop. My office instructed to advance you up to $25,000. Stop.
Oh.
Hee-haw and Merry Christmas, Sam Wainwright.
This.
To my big brother George, the richest man in town.
And this gets me every time. Every single time.
Yep. And happy holidays to everyone watching.